there are shifts that happen in a person who actually practices Stoicism, not reads about it, not quotes it on a Monday and forgets it by Wednesday, but actually practices it day after day for years. And here's the thing almost nobody talks about: what those shifts actually feel like from the inside. People love talking about the ideas. Control what you can, accept what you can't. Virtue is the only real good. Fine, true enough. But what does it actually do to a person over time to keep choosing that over and over in ordinary, unglamorous moments nobody's watching? Today, I want to walk through 5 real observable changes that show up in people who've genuinely put the work in. Not mystical experiences, not signs from the universe, just the very human, very grounded result of training your mind on purpose for a long time. If you recognize yourself in some of these, that's not proof you're special or ahead of everyone else. It's just proof the practice is doing what it's supposed to do. Let's get into it. 1. Your reactions get a beat slower. On purpose. The first thing that changes is timing, not your feelings necessarily. Your response time. Something happens. Someone cuts you off in traffic. A plan falls apart at the last minute. A person says something that lands like a slap. And where there used to be an instant reaction, voice raised, defenses up, words already halfway out of your mouth, there's now a small gap, a breath, a beat. Epictetus talked about this as the space between impression and assent, the moment a thing happens to you, and the separate moment where you actually decide what it means and what you're going to do about it. Most people live like those 2 moments are fused together, happening as one. They're not. And once you've practiced noticing that gap actually exists, it's genuinely hard to unnotice it. You catch yourself mid-reaction and think, wait, do I actually need to respond to this right now? Or is this just my nervous system doing its thing? To be clear, this isn't suppression, and it's worth being honest about that distinction because it gets muddled a lot. Stoicism was never interested in people who feel nothing. Seneca wasn't chasing numbness. He was pretty explicit that grief, anger, fear are all human and reasonable responses to real things. What he was interested in was the difference between a person who feels something and a person who's ruled by what they feel. The change isn't that the sting disappears. It's that feeling the sting and acting on the sting stop being automatically the same event. This shows up in small, unglamorous ways, long before it feels like anything dramatic. You don't fire off the angry text at midnight. You write it, and you don't send it. And in the morning, you're relieved you didn't. You let the passive-aggressive comment in the meeting go, instead of derailing the whole thing to defend your ego. You notice you're about to snap at someone you actually love over something genuinely small, and you just don't. Not because you've become a saint, because there was a beat there, and in that beat, you had an actual choice, maybe for the first time in that particular situation. People around you often don't experience this as anything philosophical at all. They just start experiencing you as steadier, less combustible, someone who doesn't spike as easily. That's usually the first outward sign that something real is happening underneath, long before it feels like a big internal shift to you. 2. You stop needing things to go a certain way. This one's harder to talk about without it sounding like indifference. So let me be careful here, because it isn't indifference, not even close. Early on, most people's sense of peace is entirely conditional. I'll be okay if this works out. I'll feel settled if they respond the way I'm hoping. Practice Stoicism seriously for a while, and something underneath that starts to shift. You still have preferences, often strong ones. You still work HE8, but your peace gradually stops being wired directly into whether you actually get them. Marcus Aurelius wrote about this constantly in his private notebook, not because it came naturally to him, but because it clearly, visibly didn't. A man running an empire through plague, betrayal, and endless war has every reason in the world to white-knuckle every single outcome. And yet, he kept circling back to the same idea, almost like he was reteaching it to himself daily. You have power over your own judgment, not over events themselves. That's not resignation dressed up as wisdom. It's actually a much harder standard to live by, because it demands you do the work fully, completely, without holding back, and then genuinely let the outcome be whatever it turns out to be, without your sense of self riding on it. Here's what that looks like in practice. You put real effort into something, a project, a relationship, a goal you've been chasing for months, and it doesn't land the way you wanted. The earlier version of most people spirals here, replays it obsessively, feels like a personal failure for days, sometimes longer. The version that's actually internalized this a bit more just assesses it. What was actually in my control here? Did I do that part well? What's the next useful move? There's a flatness to that response that can look almost strange to people used to more emotional theater around setbacks. It's not that you don't care. It's that your identity was never actually staked on the result to begin with. The effort was yours. The outcome never fully was, and you'd made peace with that division a long time before this particular setback showed up. 3. Other people's opinions lose their grip gradually. This shift tends to move the slowest of all 5, and it's probably the one most people actually want the most, while underestimating just how long it takes to arrive. At the start, most of us are running a quiet background process almost constantly, whether we'd admit it or not. How did that land? What do they think of me now? Did I say the wrong thing back there? Epictetus lived this out about as extremely as anyone in recorded history. Born into slavery, physically disabled from mistreatment by an owner with essentially zero social standing by any measure of his era, and still arrived at something like, people are going to judge you regardless of what you do, so let their judgment be their business, and let your own character remain entirely yours. What actually changes here practically isn't that you stop caring what people think of you at all. That would honestly be a strange, somewhat cold place to end up. And most serious Stoic writers were clear they weren't pursuing that. What changes is that other people's opinions stop being load-bearing for your sense of self. They become information, sometimes useful, sometimes not, instead of a verdict on your worth as a person. You can hear, I don't think that was a good call from someone, and actually sit with it, actually consider whether they've got a point, instead of either collapsing under the comment or reflexively getting defensive about it. The clearest tell here tends to show up in how you handle criticism specifically. Early in the practice, criticism either wrecks you for the rest of the day or triggers immediate defensiveness, sometimes both, one right after the other. Later on, you notice you can genuinely just sit with it for a second. Ask yourself honestly whether there's something true buried in there. Take whatever's useful, quietly set aside the rest, without your whole nervous system getting dragged into it. That's not confidence in the "I don't need anyone's approval" sense people sometimes mean. It's something a little quieter than that. You've simply stopped outsourcing your own self-assessment to whoever happens to be in the room with an opinion that day. 4. Your attention gets more selective, and you start noticing the cost of not doing that. Seneca has this one line that's stuck with people for roughly 2,000 years now. It's not that we have a short life, it's that we waste a great deal of it. Practice this seriously for a while, and you actually start feeling the cost of wasted attention in real time, not just nodding along with it as an abstract idea you agree with in principle. You'll notice increasingly exactly when you're spending mental energy on something that genuinely doesn't deserve it. A stranger's opinion online you'll never think about again in a week. A slight that was almost certainly accidental. A hypothetical argument you're rehearsing in the shower that will, statistically, never actually happen. And here's the practical part. Noticing it starts to actually change your behavior, not just your awareness of the pattern. You put the phone down mid-scroll, mid-thought. You stop replaying the conversation for the 4th time that day. You redirect deliberately towards something that actually matters to you. This isn't about productivity for its own sake. The Stoics were not, whatever internet quote graphics might have you believe, an ancient hustle culture movement. It's closer to guarding something genuinely scarce. You start treating your attention the way you'd treat any limited valuable resource, not something you hand out freely to whatever or whoever's demanding it, loudest in any given moment. Marcus Aurelius wrote about confining yourself to the present, doing the task directly in front of you with real, precise seriousness, rather than being half present while your mind's off somewhere else entirely. That's not a productivity hack dressed up in old language. It's closer to what it actually looks like to value your own limited time enough to actively defend it. The side effect people around you tend to notice is that you seem less scattered than you used to, calmer in an understated, almost boring way. Not because your life got objectively simpler or less demanding, but because you stopped bleeding attention into 100 things you were never going to be able to do anything about anyway. 5. Setbacks start looking different, not just feeling different. The last shift is probably the deepest of the 5, and it also takes the longest to genuinely settle in, because it requires enough repeated exposure to real hardship for it to become believable, rather than staying purely theoretical. Something you agree with intellectually, but haven't actually tested. Early in the practice, a setback still just feels bad. A failure, a loss, a door closing somewhere you'd hoped it would open. And mostly, you're just trying to manage the feeling as it hits. Later on, something shifts in how you actually interpret the event itself, not merely how you cope with it afterward. Marcus Aurelius put it plainly, "What stands in the way becomes the way." Not as a cute reframe you deploy after the fact to feel a bit better about a bad outcome, but as something closer to an honest repeated observation. That the obstacle very often genuinely is the material you end up working with, whether or not you ever wanted it in the first place. It's worth being clear that this isn't toxic positivity, because it does get flattened into that a lot in how it's shared online. Nobody serious is claiming the setback doesn't hurt, or that you're somehow supposed to feel grateful for it in the actual moment it lands. Seneca lost most of his fortune at various points, was exiled for years, and was eventually ordered by an emperor he'd once personally tutored to take his own life. He never once pretended any of that was pleasant or easy to sit with. What he kept returning to, again and again in his letters, was that difficulty is genuinely where character gets built, the way resistance builds strength in a body. Not as a metaphor exactly, but as an honest description of how humans actually seem to develop real resilience over time. In practice, this shows up as a quiet kind of curiosity that starts appearing alongside the disappointment, rather than instead of it. You lose something, a job, a relationship, an opportunity you'd counted on. And underneath the very real grief or frustration, there's a second, quieter question running in parallel. Okay, so what does this actually make available now that wasn't available before? Not forced positivity, not a silver lining performance for anyone watching. Just an added dimension to how you're processing the loss, because you've had enough repetitions now of hardship eventually turning out to matter in ways you couldn't have predicted at the time, that you've genuinely started to expect it, not hope for it. Expect it. Where that actually leaves you. None of these 5 changes happen fast, and none of them happen because you happen to read the right quote at the right emotionally charged moment. They happen the boring, unglamorous way, through repetition, through actually practicing the pause instead of just admiring the idea of it, through actually sitting with criticism instead of reacting to it on instinct, through actually redirecting your attention on purpose, over and over, for a long stretch of time, usually with plenty of failed attempts scattered along the way. And it's worth being honest about a caveat here, rather than wrapping this up too neatly. None of this makes anyone invulnerable, and Stoicism was never actually claiming it would. Marcus Aurelius still grieved his own children deeply. Epictetus still lived out his whole life with real physical limitation and real social exclusion attached to it. Seneca still had to face his own death on someone else's timeline, not his own. The goal running through all of it was never a life free of difficulty or feeling. It was building a steadier, less reactive place to actually stand while difficulty and feeling happen to you anyway, because they will, regardless of how well you've practiced, which, when you sit with it, might honestly be a more useful goal than the one most of us default to without really examining it, just quietly hoping the hard things stop showing up eventually. If any of this actually resonated, it's probably worth picking just one of these 5 and practicing it deliberately this week. Not all 5 at once. That's usually how people burn out on this kind of thing fast. Just one. That's closer to how the Stoics themselves genuinely seem to approach it anyway. Never a single dramatic transformation, just a daily, fairly unglamorous repetition of the same small choice, made over and over, until eventually it isn't really a choice you're making anymore. It's just who you've become.